From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI Podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Hey everybody, welcome to SBI TV. I'm Matt Shares, the CEO of SBI, and today I'm here to talk about, with two special guests, what we're seeing market-leading CEOs and their organizations do as they take a really pragmatic approach to turning up organic revenue growth, and specifically how they're planning for a fantastic 2021. So on the show with me today, pleased to welcome Drew Urteaga, who leads our business services practice, and Manuel Guzman, CEO of CAS. One of the things you're going to notice, whether on camera or off camera, Drew's beard is actually moving up his cheeks, but it's the greatest beard in SBI right now. That's why we allow him on the show. So Drew, Manny, good to see you guys.
Good to be here, Matt. Thanks for the nice setup.
Always, man. So, Drew, I know you've got a great vantage point with your role at SBI, and Manny was kind enough to come and share some of his experience because of the outsized gain. So maybe I'll have you introduce yourself, Drew, introduce Manny, and then you guys can jump into it.
Yeah, Drew Urteaga, as you mentioned earlier, Managing Director with SBI. I've been in management consulting for 8 years, and as a practitioner, 17, 18 years. So love what I do, and I've had the pleasure of knowing our guest here, Manuel Guzman, over the last, I think it's been 5 years, Manny?
Close to it, yeah.
Yep. Those who aren't familiar, Manny's the president of Chemical Abstract Services. It's a division of the American Chemical Society. They've got 1,300 employees, and they operate globally across every region in the country, in the world. And what's really unique about their solutions is they build chemically intelligent technologies that leverage and integrate to solve big data challenges. That's a mouthful right there. In essence, they're the leader in scientific information, so they really work within academia, commercial, and government, and they help organizations drive innovation. So timely, Manny, right? When you think about what the world is going through in a pandemic and how you guys play in those workflows, helping organizations, work towards finding a vaccine. So not only love the organization, but love the mission in terms of where you guys are trying to go. Thanks for being here.
Absolute pleasure.
So, Manny, I guess, as part of today's conversation, you think about the recessionary environment, and SBI has found that there's really three camps, right? It's really been interesting through the last 4 or 5 months. We've kind of seen and observed leaders in three buckets. Survive, those that are reacting tactically to the marketplace, and either, a good example of that would be, hey, how do we retain the base, right? And what are the things we need to do to keep our customer base? Then you think about the observe, right? The observe is a step above that, which is, hey, we're doing all the retention, and then what are the things that we can deploy, maybe potentially new solutions to drive growth, or how can we extend the life cycle of our customers by renegotiating contracts? That would be another example of observe. And then you think about the accelerators, constantly pushing the envelope, trying new things, whether moving up market, down market, market expansion, driving market share. And that's one of the reasons we invited you today. We see you as an accelerator, not just in what you've done and from a results perspective, but how you drive the team. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on from your perspective in the marketplace, specifically what you've observed from a customer demand changing and evolving?
Absolutely. And guys, thanks for the invitation today. And Drew, I appreciate the lead in here. From our perspective, it's interesting you use the word recession, and for us, it's actually almost the opposite. It's really an opportunity. As you mentioned, we're a global information solution provider, right? So we provide large-scale information resources to folks doing scientific discovery, specifically in and around drug discovery. So with the onset of COVID, it's created an opportunity in our customers to actually accelerate some of their research and development and drug discovery efforts, which therefore presents an opportunity for us. So what others are viewing as a recession, we are actually taking the opportunity to accelerate, using some of your words here, accelerate some of our existing strategies in a way that we otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to do if this recession/pandemic didn't approach. So specifically, I'll give you a couple of areas. Drew, you know this. I think we've been on a mission here for the last 2-3 years to elevate our brand. We're probably the best kept secret in the world of scientific information, scientific discovery. So in an attempt to accelerate some of our product and solutions strategies, we need to elevate our brand so folks can ultimately find us. When COVID hit, and quite frankly, the world started to recess a little bit, our customers actually began to accelerate their activity. What we did was take the opportunity to basically contact all our existing accounts and let them know they have unrestricted access to all our scientific information in our databases. We proactively reached out to big data organizations, content companies, drug development companies, biotech companies, and offered up our resources. We began to publish scientific information in the form of white papers and scientific research that was put out in the public domain. And additionally to that, we created free scientific resources, databases, if you would, that could be downloaded by folks looking for a vaccine or treatment around the world. So we saw this as an opportunity to accelerate an existing strategy around brand elevation. A second one, which you're obviously very familiar with, is our services play. Historically, we've been known as a product company, and we've been morphing that into more of a full-blown services solutions company. Instead of subscribing or being known as a provider of subscription services to an entity, we want to be viewed as a multifaceted partner. What COVID did was open up the opportunity for us to begin to engage with our customer base in a way that was not biased or not to some extent clouded by the perception of the business development effort, but purely about us being willing to help with scientific discovery. That immediately enabled us to accelerate that services strategy as well. So high-level dialogues with decision makers beyond just negotiations around subscriptions. We're talking about customized services that leverages our technology, our people, as well as our content assets.
Yeah, but what people might not know, Manny, what's interesting is when you talk about the brand elevation and you talk about the deployment of services, right, as a value add to your base of customers and enhancing that partnership, what people might not know is they might hear that and say, you just deployed that tactically, right, based on what was happening, but that was already part of your strategy that you had built previously, right? So it was just almost an acceleration of that strategy, and that's the nuance that I want our audience to make sure they don't miss. This wasn't something you created in year or a strategy that you created in year. It was something that was baked in and actually surfaced, right? As
Absolutely.
part of
you used the key word there earlier in your description, accelerator. In effect, COVID created a change in the business environment that allowed us to immediately react, step in, and accelerate the process of pursuing these strategies that we laid out, obviously, over the last couple of years. More of an acceleration, more so than creation right now.
So, Drew, I think what's interesting about Manny's example that is so contextual for the audience, for the viewers and listeners right now, is he built a construct that allowed him to be nimble. To your point, he wasn't in this, I've already made all these bets. He had a dynamic construct that allowed him to literally, as he said, just lever up something, go quick and capture demand. And just for the audience sake, I mean, Manny is growing over 2x the market rate. So when you talk about accelerators and how to measure organic revenue growth, folks, you got to understand how fast your industry is growing. How fast are you growing relative to that? So, Drew, I think that's a really interesting piece because we're seeing people struggling with reimagining their commercial engine, but Manny's got the baseline where he could just lean into something that existed because of the way that he built it the first time.
No, that's a great observation. This is more about organizational design and organizational process. When COVID hit, we were built in such a way that we could immediately convene as a leadership team, talk about the opportunity associated with the environmental disruption, and then just turn our engine on, redirect the ship, and start accelerating the strategy. The first discussion I went through, the discussion of our outreach, our scientific outreach, basically happened over a weekend. I mean, The priority was obviously the safety of our employees. But then once we came up for air, said, hey, look, there may be an opportunity here for us to do the right thing for the broader scientific enterprise, but as importantly, accelerate our brand elevation strategy. Let's go. Let's give away some stuff for free. Let's start creating free downloadable information. Let's get our scientists together and start crafting scientific research and delivering that research out into the open space. So the infrastructure was there that supported the acceleration of the strategic opportunity during COVID.
Manny, when you talk about, I'll call them the plays you ran, we see market leaders use a pragmatic approach, right? They reassess, they reimagine, and then they reallocate. Did you don't have to go too much into specifics about the sectors or the segments, but were there things where you saw trends and you said, hey, we're gonna aim these plays and our strategy towards certain segments we're going to prioritize or deprioritize? How'd you think through that, and maybe tie it back to some of the bets you made, right? Beliefs and the bets that you made coming into the year.
I think in a nutshell, speed is of utmost importance here, particularly in the world we're in. There is a first mover advantage associated with some of the things we talked about during COVID. So was there a lot of research? Was there a lot of time trying to understand, a full-blown business case and what the potential outcomes would be? The reality is it wasn't. You pulled together your best intuition at the time. You have to be willing to take a risk and take advantage of the opportunity that speed to market presents you. So I'd like to sit here and tell you there were full-blown business cases that justified every one of our pivots or our course corrections, but that really wasn't the case. You look for that opportunity, you move quick, you assess what the potential downside risk was, and you move along.
Can you've highlighted two really revenue growth levers that you're executing to. How did you talk a little bit of how did you drive execution through the team, given, you got 1,300 employees, you guys are globally now, all employees are virtual. You got this customer base that needs to be served. You're juggling all these different priorities. How did you drive execution within your team and then cascade that down?
It's probably maybe three basic elements to it. Matt touched on it earlier. We came into this with an organization that's relatively nimble. So having that as a foundation enables you to even think about taking on some of these opportunities to accelerate during a time of a pandemic or a business disruption. So number one, we had a nice nimble foundation for change. Number two is around messaging and kind of rallying the troops. So we have a hyper communication strategy here, Drew, as I think you know about, but immediately bringing together the thought leadership across the company, sharing ideas, and then quickly disseminating those concepts out as opportunity to a broader group of individuals who are ultimately going to be responsible for executing on it. That was a part two. You really got to get folks excited about the opportunity to maybe change course in a relatively short period of time. And then number three, quite frankly, it's trial and error. Some of the things you do or you pivot towards doing, you may not have the experiential knowledge to do in an absolute fashion. But recognizing that, learning on the job, seeking outside expertise as you start to navigate your way down a new path in a relatively expedited fashion is probably part three of the equation.
Hey, Drew, I wonder, you think about the success that Manny and the team have had leading up to, and Manny, I loved how you called it a business disruption. It's just like your mindset. That's so great. Leading up to this time, and then the ability to step on the accelerator. One of the things I noticed from spending some time with you was you'll have a belief, you'll make a bet, then you will run that out and then look at the data, and then you're not afraid to shut it down. And one of the challenges that I see many of your peers, other CEOs, is they don't have a great decision-making construct. Right? They know they got to make decisions and they got to make a lot of them, big and small, but they don't say, I have a set of assumptions, so that's a belief. Because of that belief, I'm going to make this bet over this time frame with this set of assumptions. We're going to run it hard, And then based on that, we're either going to keep going or shut it down. So Drew, maybe, and Drew, because you spend so much time working through sort of multi-year evolutions with different folks, how does that come into play at a time like this when people are planning for 2021? So Drew, maybe question to you as we sort of wrap up this piece of the show, and then back to Manny.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's learnings you got to capture, and this is when you think about this as a program, right? You know, what are the things that you're going to use and inject the learnings and the insights, and we like to call this, you know, market listening. Manny, you and I have talked about this terminology. You know, what are the market listening posts that will help infuse and optimize your strategic planning process that, you know, many people are going through right now or beginning to go through, that will help, you know, answer the question, how do we prevent this from happening in the future and going into next year, and how do we get back on the path of the growth trajectory that we were on, or how do we accelerate it as well? So I think capturing that, having the market listening posts is really critical. Designing a program, right? These things can't be an event. We kind of make shelfware, put it away, we forget about it, and then, you know, everything is fine and dandy for the next 3 years, and then we get hit with another pandemic or, you know, another major event that's going to impact businesses across the globe. So that's the other thing. And what I mean about program is, hey, this is a journey. It's got, you know, pit stops, it's got milestones, it's got outcomes. It's not something that we just see how we did at the end of December or at the end of the fiscal year and say, hey, did we do well or not? And we're constantly iterating on that. So understanding what the pit stops look like and the journey looks like is really critical. And then lastly, I would say roles and responsibilities and accountability. Who owns the execution plan, you know, in the case of Manny for the corporate strategy, all right? Who owns it? Who drives that? Who's informing? Who's bringing the insights? And how are we pivoting around those insights as an organization, like Manny's team has done, being nimble and agile through that journey?
Manny, if you think about the growth culture that you've created, there's a real difference in companies in this top decile that have what we call a real revenue growth culture. And I know that wasn't overnight, but I mean, any final advice you would share with other CEOs? And I'm thinking more specifically about like your direct reports and how you built that team.
You know, Matt, there's a bunch of cliches out there about acting with a sense of urgency and all, but and I think I had this conversation with Drew. I think to some extent you have to remain insecure about your ability to protect your business. Every day you have to come in and have an insecurity that you're going to fail. And that, you know, you can be confident. Obviously, you could put a strategy in place and you got to rally an organization, but you always got to be pushing forward. You always got to think about product lifecycle management. The portfolio you're managing today will age out. So what are the things you're going to layer in to continue to have incremental growth going forward? And that's what we do here. Despite our success, and you're obviously very familiar with it over the last 4, 5, 6 years now, we remain extremely hungry, extremely diligent about trying to understand what else we can layer onto the portfolio to drive growth, while appreciating the fact that what we're managing today will attrit out. So that insecurity, that hunger, that desire to continue to perform, I think that's our culture.
Great. All right, guys. Well, hey, great to see you both. Wish it was in person and we could go grab a meal, but this is the next best alternative. So Manny, thanks for sharing your time and your insight with the audience. Drew, always good to see you, and thank you for your feedback. To our viewers and listeners, you just got a front row seat of what market leaders are doing, specifically this camp we call Accelerators. And I think from my perspective, there'd be a couple things I would recap that make what Manny has done so top decile, but also has some fundamentals that you can take into your planning. Number one, he's pragmatic. He takes a very pragmatic view, looks at the market, and then is always reassessing, as opposed to, like Drew said, set it, forget it, and then wake up in 3 years and have your disruption handed to you. Go the other way. Number two is, what are the new opportunities? How do I reimagine my commercial bets so I can move quickly? And then number 3, centralizing execution. You heard Manny talk about that urgency, but also that paranoia. So if you're going to grow 2x the market and you think about how he's feeling, if you're not growing at that rate, you probably want to ask yourself a question, what does he have that you don't have? Because that's the question I'm asking right now. So with that being said, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.